Everyone, this is Jappy from Standout Running. Thank you again for tuning in. I always really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And today is going to be kind of a special episode. I'm actually not going to be talking about shoes or anything racing. Instead, I'm going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite things, and that is books. Yes, I am a massive book nerd, and I've always have been. It probably started when I was little. I was raised by a single mother, an only child, so it was just kind of me and her for most of my life, and she had her own business, so I was often left on my own, and I filled that time up a lot with reading. My first obsession became with Goosebumps. I was a massive Goosebumps fan. I read like every Goosebumps book, all the Choose Your Own Scares, all of them. I loved them, and to this day, I will still read a Goosebumps book if I'm like, can't find a book I want to read. Judge me all you want. I love those things. I even got my son into reading them, so I love reading my Goosebumps books with my son. All right, so I read a lot when I was younger, and then one of my best memories comes from a book, and that's with my grandma. So I loved my grandma, like, so much. I mean, most people love their grandma, because, grandmas are the best. But I would spend every weekend with my grandma, and when she got older, I was probably 10, 11. What she would do, she was in a wheelchair, and so she always wanted to go out, and I was the only one able to take her out. So she would get in the wheelchair, and I would push her down the block into this kind of like neighborhood of hers. She lived in Bethesda, Maryland, so there was like some shopping centers around, and we always did the same thing. She always loved this little Italian restaurant called Little Maggiano's. They're still around, so you might know them. And so we would go there, we'd have lunch, and right next to that was Borders. Now, you probably don't even know what a Borders is. Borders was like Barnes & Noble before there was Barnes & Noble. Like, maybe you could say, for more of a sport analogy, Barnes & Noble is Dick's Sporting Goods, and Borders is Sports Authority. All right. It was a big store. It was a massive store. 2 floors, 2 stores. So anyway, the point is that after lunch, she would always take me into the bookstore, and I would give it a chance to get a book, and I loved that. And 9 times out of 10, I would always go to the Goosebumps section. I would find new Goosebumps books because there were so many. Also, Animorphs, things like that, like those books, kind of your real boy books. But one day, she found another book, and she gave it to me, and she asked me, "Hey, how about this one?" And I looked at the cover, and I was not interested. It did not look like a good book for me. So I'm like, no, I'm good, Grandma. I just want to, get the ones I normally get. And so she made me a deal. She's like, how about I get you 2 Goosebumps books and this book, and you read it to me, because I'm kind of interested in it. And, it was my grandma. I could never say no to my grandma. So I said, all right, that's fine. So we got the book, and we went back to her apartment, and she settled in a chair, and I took out the book, and I started to read. And I mean, I think like 5 pages in, I was hooked, and I just wanted to read on and on. 10 pages in, my grandma fell asleep. Yeah, it was not her book at all. But the thing about my grandma is she didn't care. She just liked to see me reading. She enjoyed me reading to her. So I could have been reading to her the Cheesecake Factory menu, and she would have been happy. And this book happened to be Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So the very first one had just come out, and since then it became a kind of tradition where every time a Harry Potter book would come out, I would walk my grandma to the Borders. We would get the book, and I would read it at her apartment. Now, what was really sad is when the last book came out, like 1 week before that, she had passed away, and I was devastated. I was, and like, I kind of held on to that book, not feeling right. Like, I wanted to read it, of course, but it didn't feel right to read without my grandma. So eventually I read it, and I finished it, but that book series had a major impact on me, because when I see those books, I think of my grandmother. In fact, I even have kind of my Harry Potter tattoos, if you can see it. So yes, I'm a massive pothead. No, I think there's a better way to say that. Also, Team Slytherin. I know. I don't know why. Apparently, I'm that type of person. Um, but then since then, I've always been a massive reader. I always travel with a book with me. In fact, reading has become a major part of my running. A lot of times, when right before a race would go, I would either sit in my car or I would bring a book with me, and I would just sit off on my own and I would read, because that would draw my focus to that instead of thinking about the race and getting nervous. It would help calm me down. And then on my long training runs, I would listen to an audiobook. I always found music, I would just kind of like, nope, next song, and I get bored with it. But books held my interest, so it would feel like I was just running on and on. Maybe some of you do that. If not, try it out. It's pretty good. Now I'm more listening more podcasts, but I do still love my audiobooks. Anyway, I always thought that my career was going to be as a runner. I thought I was going to go professional. I was very good. I was very good. Then my accident happened. My leg needed surgery. The surgery went bad. I went wrong. I ended up dying on the table. Obviously brought back to life, but my leg never healed right, and I was told I could never run again. And so my running career was over, and I became very depressed. And again, I turned to books to help me. Of course, I read a lot of self-help books and things like that, but also in a new way, because I knew running wasn't going to be my future. So I wanted to find something else, and so I started writing. I actually wrote 3 books and had them all published, and I'm very proud of that. That being said, you ever been to like a Walmart or like one of those like department stores, and where there's like the media section, there's like these big baskets, and it's like filled to the brim with like hundreds of DVDs. Hopefully you're old enough to even know what a DVD is, because now you just stream everything. But there's all these DVDs, and they look like extremely weird. And you like reach down in there and you pull out one, you're like, what the heck is this? Like, who would make this movie? And it was like $3. Let's just say my books wouldn't have even made it into that bin. So I did not make a lot of money. I enjoyed writing, I loved it, but it was not a career for me. So, what do I do next? I was always lost. I had completed my college degree as a special education teacher, and I looked to go into that field, but there was so many politics. I love working with kids, especially those who needed support or face any disabilities or anything. But the politics and the writing and oh my God, it was just so much more than just being able to help the kids, that I didn't like it. So I became an English teacher for a time, and as an English teacher, I was forced to do so many things I didn't feel good about. Like, for example, we would always force these kids to read the same books that I read as a kid, that my parents read as a kids. And listen, I adore classics. I do. I appreciate them so much now. I love a good Shakespeare. I love Great Gatsby, Moby Dick, the Odyssey, To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, The Crucible, all these books. I really enjoy them. But that's not what kids want to read now. Kids don't want to read now. That's the problem. And I saw that. And I felt like I wasn't making a difference. So I went from an English teacher into being a reading specialist, which I currently am now. And that is a much more fulfilling career. I get to work with kids and help them establish strengths and reading stamina. And I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of kids who have, seen the benefits of reading. And by the way, if you're a parent listening to this, or you're a reluctant reader, it's not that hard to get someone to enjoy reading. What you need to do is you need to find what they enjoy. Look at the movies they watch. Look at the games they play. Look at the singers or something like that, and find something in that common ground. Find something that is that goes with their type of style, and then you're gonna have a more avid reader. All right, take my son for example. All right, so me, I'm a massive reader. I love books. My wife is a machine. Like, I read about like 120, 130 books a year, and I thought I was like a massive reader. I was like, man, I go through some books. My wife does like 270. She hasn't broken 300 yet, but she's close. And I mean, sometimes I don't think I think she just skims. To be honest, she says she doesn't, but I think she just skims parts, because there's no way someone reads that fast. And then if she does an audiobook, she like puts the speed up, but like on 2, so it sounds like she's listening to gerbils, and it just, I like to enjoy them. Anyway, my son, so he hated to read, and he really hated it, and he was not great with it. And then in school, he would need extra support. He would need a reading specialist like myself, and so I tried the best I can do to help him. I would read with him all the time, but he was never interested. He was always bored. He wanted to do something else until I introduced him to manga. If you don't know what manga is, that is like the Japanese comic books. I know that's insulting, but they are a lot more. Some of these stories are very rich, they're very emotional, they're very action-packed. There's much more depth to manga stories than are general comic books, in my opinion. Of course, there's some standout comics out there. And my big thing is just getting a person to read is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what you're reading as long as you are reading. And so I introduced my son to One Piece, which is about pirates, and he absolutely loved it. And he has torn through all these manga series, and he's like reading every day. I mean, he has a full bookshelf of mangas. In fact, it's getting too expensive now. I almost want to say no more reading to him, but I can't, because I love seeing him do it, and he loves it so much. Like, that's how you get people reading. Anyway, so I'm a reading specialist, and since I've recovered from my injury and my setbacks, I always turn to books to motivate me. So more and more I read these like kind of nonfiction books, and most of them are about running and runners, and it helps motivate me. So what I wanted to do today is share with you some of my favorite running books. Now, these books are more story driven, if you will. I'm not saying there's like one in there that's fiction. Most of the others are nonfiction, but they're about people. I'm not talking about your Daniel's Running Formula, your training books, which all have a great place. Those I set in a different category. Those are your read to be informed, and these are more your read to be entertained. But of course, you do learn a lot of things along the way. All right, so with that being said, let me get through some of my favorite running books, and maybe you might want to pick one up. All right. The first book I want to talk about is Born to Run by Christopher McDougall. Now, I want to mention this one because of the impact it made, and it is controversial. So when this book is mostly about this journalist, Christopher McDougall, who had a lot of trouble running. He had all these problems, and so he went on this journey to see the Tarahumara, which is an indigenous group where they all train long distance, and the key thing is that they would just go in their bare feet or small sandals. So most of the book is really interesting. There's a lot of science of it is about why barefoot running is so healthy for you. Now, it's entertaining, it's interesting. However, I do have to say the problem with it is that book led a massive boom. And during the time I was working at a running store, and the most popular shoes were the Vibram 5 Fingers. And people were like, oh, well, I'm just going to go with those. And they would buy them, and they would come back probably a week to 3 weeks later with an injury, wondering what happened. So the book was extremely popular, and now it's kind of like looked frowned upon because of how it steers people in the wrong direction. In fact, at that time, there were supposed to make a movie of it with Matthew McConaughey playing one of the key characters, which would have been pretty good, I think. But that said, I think it's entertaining. It's a good adventure read, but of course, take the science and everything with a grain of salt, and please don't go running around barefoot if you've never done so before. The next book is from one of my all-time favorite authors, Haruki Murakami. He is from Japan, and he is one of the most prolific writers of our time. Now, this book is a part memoir and part reflection on life, where Murakami shares how running became a central part of his identity. He connects the discipline required for long-distance running with the discipline needed to write novels. Through stories of marathons, triathlons, and daily training, he explores perseverance, aging, and self-discovery. It's absolutely beautifully written, as I find all his books to be. So this is a very sweet story and really shows the passion a person can have for running. The next book is called Endure by Alex Hutchinson. This is a science-based book that examines the limits of human endurance. Hutchinson explores cutting-edge research on fatigue, pain, hydration, oxygen, and mental toughness. He argues that many limits are controlled by the brain rather than the body, and understanding this can help athletes perform better. This is a bit of an older book. By older books, I mean like 3 to 5 years, so it's not really that old, but so much has changed since then. So some of it might not be as accurate or might not be as relevant. However, it's still a very motivational book. It's very interesting to learn about these things, and I think it's a very good time to read that book, considering the records that are just breaking all the time in all running distances. The next book is not just one of my favorite running books. It is one of my all-time favorite books in general. Once a Runner by the author John L. Parker Jr. is widely considered the greatest running novel ever written. It follows collegiate runner Quentin Cassidy as he pursues excellence in the mile. Through relentless training and sacrifice, Cassidy learns what it takes to reach elite levels. The book captures the obsession and dedication required for greatness. Now, this is a fictional book, but it really captures that feeling of what it takes to be a great runner, dedication. The characters are great. It's a great story. Now, I will say that Once Runner is actually now part of a trilogy. Once Runner came out first, then John L. Parker then wrote a book called Again to Carthage, which was the sequel, where Cassidy is older and he eventually takes on the marathon. I really enjoyed that one. And then he went back and wrote a prequel, and that's called Racing in the Rain. And that is where our key character, Quentin Cassidy, he's young. He really wants to be a basketball star. However, he discovers running, and you start to see signs of his skills in running. So if you read them all together, you get a progression of what it's like to really become a fully dedicated runner. But however, that being said, if you're only going to read one, I of course would recommend Once Runner, that being my much more preferred of the three, but all three are good. The next book is a very interesting book, especially for our controversial times, and that's called Running While Black by Alison Mariella Deser. I could be saying her last name wrong, if so, I apologize. What this book is an intersection of running, race, and social justice. She shares personal experience and highlights barriers Black runners face while advocating for greater inclusion in the sport. The book challenges readers to think about who feels welcome in running spaces. This really opened up my eyes to a lot of things I never thought of, I never knew, and like when you think of running in America, you think of mostly white Caucasian people. There are, of course, a lot of African Americans who run, but it's not as prevalent. And it's really interesting to see why that is, what barriers they have to face. So I cannot recommend this book enough more. It's very enlightening and made me feel different about my running and all these races. The next book is called Iron War, and this is a little bit of a cheat because it's not strictly a running book. It's actually about two triathletes. That being said, it's absolutely fantastic to see the rivalry grow, because that's one thing that running doesn't have too much, where you don't see people like really challenging each other. You see people go to a race, and it's mostly celebrations. Now is some rivalries, of course, probably more so in the track field, but still, this is really shows what it's like to be two athletes at the top of their game, and it's very like motivating. So the book recounts the legendary rivalry between Mark Allen and Dave Scott, culminating in the iconic 1989 Ironman World Championship. It tells a gripping story of competition, preparation, and mutual respect. The next book really caught me by surprise, by Martinus Evans, and it's the Slow AF Run Club. You probably know what the AF stands for, and this was a very uplifting and motivating book. It is about Evans encourages runners of all sizes, speeds, and backgrounds to embrace movement without worrying about pace. The book promotes body positivity and breaks down stereotypes about who can be a runner. Now, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm sure a lot of people will look at this book and think like, well, I don't look like that. I'm a better runner than that, and they will skip it. But it's a really sweet story, and it really shows what it means to be a runner, that everyone is a runner if they give it a try. So it's a really, really sweet book, and I also learned a lot from it, and kind of actually helped me with my mental state, because oftentimes I am down on myself considering where I was to where I am now. So it made me feel good about myself, and I think everyone can take something from this book. The next book is another fantastic read. It's by Neil Babscom, and it's called The Perfect Mile. And this is a historical account. It follows the race to break the first 4-minute mile. It focuses on Roger Bannister, John Landley, and Wes Santee as they chase what many believe was impossible. This is a great book. It's non-fiction, but it reads like a very good fictional story, very entertaining, edge of your seat, and it's a very good read considering the 2-hour marathon was just broken, and that was deemed to be impossible. Same thing was with the 4-minute mile. I know it's kind of common now. It's still hard, obviously, but a lot of people run under that time. But at the time, this was seen like scientifically impossible to do, and it's such an interesting story about these three athletes going back to back to back. The next book is called The Running Ground by author Nicholas Thompson. Now, he has written a lot of articles about running for Wired and other magazines, but this book examines the role running plays in shaping identity, community, and personal growth. Through stories and reflections, it explores why people run and how the sport impacts lives beyond competition. This is a pretty new entry, recently released, and I just finished it, and it has jumped up to one of my favorite books. It's absolutely beautiful. It talks a lot about his relationship with his father, and his career in racing, which is very astounding on its own, but he also does a lot of features on other runners he's met along the way and their inspirational stories. So this is very richly written, like what I consider like pure literature, so very high class. I'm not to say snobby, but you can tell like this is written with a lot of care. The next book is called Running with Buffaloes by author Chris Lear. Lear follows the powerhouse University of Colorado cross-country team during a championship season under coach Mark Wetmore. The book offers an inside look at the elite collegiate training, team culture, and the pursuit of national titles. Now, this is a very interesting book. If you were ever on a running team, cross-country, or anything like that, you will really like this book. It's kind of a cult classic, if you will. Really goes into depth of training, and you really become attached to the team. The next book is kind of a surprise pick in there, and that's Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Knight tells the story of building Nike from a small startup into a global brand filled with challenges, risks, and setbacks. The memoir highlights entrepreneurship and leadership while revealing Nike's connection to the running world. Now, what's interesting about this book is, we see this Nike as this juggernaut company that just buys what they want and gets the best athletes and makes these top shoes and just is a factory. But reading this book kind of really brings Nike to a ground level, understanding that they were not always this power company. In fact, they were the underdogs for a long time. So this is very interesting into not just Nike, but shoe culture in general. The next book is by a famous runner named Kara Goucher. Some of you probably have heard of her before. It's called The Longest Race by the Inside the World, Secret World of Abuse, Doping, and Deception of Nike's Elite Running Team. So this is like the Nike Project, run by the famous runner and coach Alberto Salazar. Now, it's interesting that I put this right after I put the Shoe Dog shoe, because they tell two entirely different stories of Nike. So, you get two different perspectives. Mary Kane also came out with a similar book discussing this. This is... It's a hard book to read at times, but it is interesting to read nonetheless. All right, I know that was a long review, several books, but there's so many more out there, so many great ones that I have not mentioned, or I probably haven't even read yet. I'm always looking for a good book, so if you have any suggestions, please let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate it. But, if you love running and that is a passion of yours, I really think picking up one or several of these books will be very much worth your time. Again, as always, thank you so much for your time and for tuning in for another standout episode, I hope. And I will see you all in more videos, and hopefully you're following along. Please like and subscribe. All the best. Be bold, be fast, stand out.